The next video segment illustrates a different type of obstacle. This child's father, in his own wonderful creative way, figures out that when he takes her to his gym and they get involved in the physical activity involving batakas, which are a form of a padded stick that won't hurt, and a shield, a form of boxing, so to speak, that she is transformed, and suddenly emotion sharing becomes heightened. It's in this activity that he has found an answer to stage 1 for this teenager.
God, you're good at this.
Left.
Dave. Yeah, but just. Right.
Say it 3 times. Stop.
Now, to develop a good intervention plan, as we said, we need to focus on remediation, clearly, so that we can work on the core deficits. We need to have objectives, what stage the child is in, what objectives within that stage we should focus on to begin with. We also need to evaluate obstacles. But remediation can't be the entire plan. For example, compensations, what we might call short-term accommodations that make things easier for that person, can be really helpful and even critical, as long as we understand that if we apply them for too long, they themselves will become obstacles. Think of someone who breaks both of their legs in a skiing accident. Well, we certainly wouldn't deny them the compensation of crutches and consider that a good thing. However, if 6 months down the line they're still dependent on those crutches, the compensation has itself become the problem. So anytime we institute a compensation, no matter how good it seems, we want to make sure that we include a phasing out plan and carefully evaluate that that's taking place. Let's talk about some potentially helpful compensations in the short run. Could be providing an aid or a shadow, especially if that person was helping the child to better focus attention on the teacher, to reference the teacher, and to better coordinate with peers. Sometimes it's good to teach rule-based social rules. For example, when you go into a store, you don't strike up conversations with strangers. In class, you remain in your seat. Social rules are critical, even though they're not sufficient to be successful in dynamic systems. We might want to, with a very disorganized person, start by maintaining very predictable visual schedules and providing them an external way to stay organized. In fact, there's nothing wrong with that throughout life. Most of us have calendars on our computers or date books or to-do lists that we use. We also might initially provide the child with extra notice and preparation when there's transitions or novelty being introduced. Again, once we move to stage 5, where the child is learning to go with the flow and handle unexpected change, we would hope to eliminate that modification. Well, the final part of a comprehensive intervention plan has to include evaluating and treating disorders that might co-occur in higher frequency in people who have autism spectrum disorders. We find that in every neurological condition, there seem to be other disorders that tend to occur alongside those conditions. So, for example, people with seizure disorders have a very high frequency of also having learning disabilities. People with Tourette's disorder have a very great chance, much greater than you would expect, to have an attention deficit disorder. Well, in autism spectrum disorders, there are certain other disorders that seem to sort of tag along with the autism or Asperger's syndrome. And in the slide you're going to see, we list just a few of those. Now, it is important that we take these extremely seriously. Sometimes they can have even a more profound effect than the autism itself. So, for example, if a child is having uncontrolled seizures, we certainly would want to address that as our first step. Similarly, a child who had severe attention deficit hyperactivity disorder would benefit from an evaluation for medication even prior to beginning relationship development intervention. So it is important to look at these co-occurring disorders, but it's equally important not to mistake these or confuse these with treating autism itself. So that even if all of these areas are improved or are not problems to begin with, that means there may be fewer obstacles to working on remediation, but it certainly doesn't mean that remediation has occurred.